Hello, hello, everyone. Good Monday morning. Wow, it's Monday again, and I'm excited. We've got a special episode today on the Black Mind Garden podcast, where we are remapping minds so you can create a life you design. And as you all know, I am back with the guest. I used to do solo for season 2. I'm back with guests for season 3, and I am so excited to introduce one of my favorite people.
Not the pressure.
Ah, yes. So a little backstory. This doc right here, we went to college together. So I have
Only
known him
yesterday.
for a very, very long time. He was a friend, and we sort of like went our ways, and we recently reconnected and have been having lots of great conversation. I said, you know what? We have got to have this conversation. So today we're talking about raising empowered Black boys, dad mom conversations. And I'm happy to introduce Dr. Ayim Darkeh. Hey, Dr. Ayim.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I have to say, it's been it's been a long time coming. You are the owner of Healthy with Dr. D. You're a physician, you're an educator, you're a coach, and most importantly for this conversation, you are a dad.
That's true. Dad of two high energy children.
Yeah, so I like the audience to get to know a little bit about my guests. So just kind of share a little bit about who you are, what specifically you do now in the coaching domain, and your background, and how you came to like this place that you're on right now.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank you for having me. We have known each other for quite a long time, although it seems like only yesterday we were in college, hanging out on the quad, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
then in med school, studying in the library. So
yes, yes.
it's been a long time. So, I am a board certified emergency medicine physician. I work in some of the very busiest ERs in the nation, usually in the Northeast, but I do travel. I've also worked and practiced medicine in several countries, including Brazil, Turkey. I've done relief aid in Haiti. So I've seen the spectrum of disease that happens to people, both acutely, so things that happen in the moment, as well as the effects of chronic disease. And one of the revelations I had just working in the ER was that we needed a better structure of healthcare, not the disease care that everyone is so familiar with.
Mhm.
By the time you get the disease, and by the time it's been working on your body, ravaging your organ systems for years, and then you come to the ER, or even if you go to your doctor, so much damage has been done. So I wanted to work with patients upstream. And that's just not possible in our modern healthcare system. When they come into the ER or if they come into the office, you have very few minutes to talk to them. And we know the interventions that work are system interventions, right? We know including the entire family, including the entire social network. We know going to your home and throwing out what you don't need and getting in there the nutrients that you do need, and even mapping out in your neighborhood where there are food deserts, where you can get good, healthy meals. I mean, this is what's really required, right? This is a
Yeah,
whole total social intervention. And
yeah.
we know that the things that we often see on television, they're sexy, but they're not significant. Those aren't the
Mhm.
things that are going to keep you healthy. So I
Mhm.
decided I still work in the ER. I have a shift in a little while. In a few hours, I'll be in the ER taking care of patients. But the space that I'm in right now is trying to give people accurate information about their health and giving them a systematic approach so that they can get healthier, and then their body and their mind and their life will respond in the way that they imagine. So that's the space that I'm existing in right now.
Mm.
I've also done coaching for a long time. It began coaching residents, usually residents of color, who were struggling or having difficulties. I was their mentor, and we just would talk to them about life stuff and
Mm.
walk them through the process of being a young physician, particularly working in very challenging environments. And then I expanded that coaching to work with originally young professionals, but then professionals of all walks of life. So it's been a great journey. I'm enjoying it. It's fun.
Mhm.
It's something new to do, but all those things pale in comparison to what I do that's most important to me. And that's being a husband and, of course, being an exhausted father, taking care, and a very exhausted father, taking care of two very high energy children who keep me busy. And more importantly, that inspire me to learn and to grow in ways in which are uncomfortable sometimes, but are
Yes,
necessary.
yes.
I always tell, particularly my guy friends, I say, you never know how mature you will be until you have children. Like your level of maturity, your
Yes.
level of growth, your level of the lack of being self-centered that
Yeah.
children inspire.
Mm.
It's phenomenal. So it's a beautiful thing. And I just celebrated a good friend of mine's birthday this weekend, and there were 10 Black male physicians there, and all of us have children, and we had some great conversations. We won't have, we won't repeat those conversations here.
You can always repeat those conversations.
But they were great conversations nonetheless. And so
Yeah.
that's how I came to be here today.
I love that. It's funny because when you say, exhausted dad, I was like, oh, I didn't know dads could be exhausted. I mean, I really did know that, but like there's a bit of a conversation that moms are the ones that are always exhausted.
Right. And that's true, right? I mean, my wife is also an emergency medicine doctor, right?
Mhm.
So, it's an interesting thing, especially when the children were very young. Because of her work schedule, I spent more hours with them while they were awake than she did, right? She works weekends, so the
Mhm.
weekend I'm with the kids. But there is a connection that my children have with my wife that's just there, right? It's I always tell the story about how I took them during the pandemic. The school shut down. My kids weren't sick, so I took them to go tubing. And I packed lunch for them, and I, made hot chocolate. I did all these things, and we got there and we tubed all day. Then we were coming home. I said, "Did you guys have fun?" And the first thing they said is, "Where's mommy?" And I was like, and I was like,
Damage.
I was like, you guys can walk back to Brooklyn. You know that. You can tube right back to Brooklyn.
That's
So,
hilarious.
there is a connection that moms have. But, I think, what I'm going to call mature masculine energy, right? Which is what I think so many dads have, despite what you might hear. I think there's a lot of dads that have this mature masculine energy. And I think it's selfless.
Yeah.
It serves those around us. It's exhausted, just like moms who are selfless and serving their kids and their family. And I'm glad that we are having conversations where we acknowledge the contributions, although different and unique, but that both are contributing to the family.
And that's really why I want to have this conversation, is because
Yeah,
it's so I think that both perspectives are so interesting. I've had conversations with dads before,
sure.
and I always love these conversations the most because there are these various perspectives on um, how we approach raising our kids. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, I think that there's this role that dad energy, and I'm going to speak of dad energy, and I'm going to
Sure.
speak of mom energy, because I think that sometimes we get stuck in the box of mom and dad,
Yeah,
not remembering that sometimes there are caretakers out there who are not biological, but
absolutely.
I'm a single mom, and
Yeah,
I have a very involved co-parent dad,
yeah,
and there's a lot of other dad energy around,
sure.
right? Dad and grandpa energy
Yeah,
around, right?
yeah,
And so I think it's important to have that mom energy and that dad energy in community and in the home, and to have the perspective of, what is the role of each, like how do we step into those powerfully so that we raise empowered and balanced, um, resilient, emotionally intelligent
yeah,
children, particularly
yeah,
our Black boys.
sure. I mean, so it's interesting that I want to piggyback on the point that you just made about dad energy and the community of dad energy that exists.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, and I'm going to talk particularly in this moment about Black dads. When Black dads are surveyed or talked about, they usually think of fatherhood as a community activity in a higher degree than dads of other communities. Now,
Mhm.
part of that we understand is that we have moms that are single moms in our neighborhood. We know about mass incarceration, so we understand that there was in certain areas an absence of fathers. But
Mhm.
one of the beautiful evolutions that happened because of that tragic situation was the fact that a lot of Black fathers think of the community of fathers. There's a park right down the block from our house,
Mhm.
and if you go there on any given day, there is a dad or a granddad taking care of 7 boys. Okay. None of them are his kin. He's not
Right.
related to any of them, right? But he's showing them how to run. He's showing them how to play ball. He plays basketball with those kids.
Mhm.
He is a communal dad. And if one of those young men are acting up and I'm there, I'm like, young man, come over here, sit down. And we
Mhm.
talk, and so this dad energy is a beautiful thing. And also understanding that moms have dad energy too, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we all have, masculine and feminine energy. This is a beautiful dance. It's beautiful in all of us. And so there are times where we tap into our reservoir for different situations and different
Mhm.
circumstances.
Mhm.
And I think it works well when the best of us in that energy shows up, right?
Yeah.
When my son is sick right now, he's downstairs, he's not feeling well, and someone will say that I'm tapping into my mom energy, but he needs some comfort, right?
Mhm.
That's what he needs right now. I don't necessarily think that that's just mom energy, but
Mhm.
that comforting energy, and we call it mom energy, but that's what he requires right now. And
Mhm.
there's times where he requires someone to help reel him in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we call that dad energy,
Yeah.
and my wife does that to him sometimes. My mom does that to him sometimes, right?
Yeah.
All of those things are necessary, and it's beautiful when we have this dance, this that we don't even coordinate, but it just happens. And when we're at our best, and we're strong enough and uh, accepting enough to have both energies work in the
Yeah.
family, and I think that
Ooh.
that's what works well.
Child, you done said about three things, but you dropped about three gems on it. So first of all, I love, love, love the communal aspect. So me and my son, we take kung fu, and
Uh,
yes.
I'm not gonna mess with you. Listen, if I say something wrong, let me know before you chop me. Don't don't just judo chop me. Just
No, just do
give me a
you
warning.
know, no, but yeah, so we take kung fu, and we're in this, and I feel very grateful for the dojo that we are a part of here in Atlanta,
Mhm.
the Shaolin Institute. And there are dojos that are very strictly fight,
Right.
focused, discipline focused, but this is a very family, spiritually focused environment. And
Okay.
so, much like what you're talking about at the park, we have that very similar energy in the dojo, and it's a very diverse dojo. It's a lot of,
Nice.
just like really vast, diverse cultures inside of the dojo. There's Tai Chi, there's
Nice.
Kung Fu, there's Sanda kickboxing, and
Yeah.
so there are a lot of kids that are, that there's a kids class. And what we say is, we are the dojo moms are moms to all the kids, and
Nice.
the dojo dads are dads to all the kids. And it's understood. And even those, like some of the instructors that don't have kids, they have that dad energy, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they can be like, kids, or then like, come over and talk. You can, you could do this, and you already know the form, and da da da, da, and like
Excellent.
these types of things, right? So it's like
Yeah.
when I go to the dojo, I feel like, my son is taken care of, right? Because
Mm.
there is that dad energy and that mom, that balanced energy there.
Yeah.
And so that brings me to the second thing you said, which is that one can embody both energies.
Sure.
And I think it's so key that we understand that as we grow and we become more emotionally fluent, that we learn to access both of those energies. We learn to access when it's necessary, and be okay with accessing both mom energy and the dad energy, and and whether both mom and dad are in the home or not, right?
Yeah.
Both parents can access both energies, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I speak of mom energy and dad energy because it's just the way most people understand it, but we know, like, that's just the label that we put on it, right?
Sure.
The
Yeah.
nurturing energy, and then the more firm disciplinary, like reel you in energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes.
Boundary energy.
Boundary energy, yes. So I just really love that you said that.
Well, one of the things I wanted to piggyback on what you said, and because you were talking about your dojo, and it made me think about also when I'm at the Spark or even play dates, I always call it proximity parenting, right?
Yes,
Whoever is closest to you is your parent at that moment, right? So I tell my son all the time, and this is of course with trusted adults, right?
of course.
When you're with an adult, whoever is closest to you, that's the parent at that moment, and that's the
Yeah.
person that you need to listen to, right? So if there's a great park, not the one right here, but further. It's a huge, big park. And we'll often go there with friends, family, whatever adult is closest to you at that moment. That's your parent.
Yeah.
And so if they say, don't do that or do this, or let's get out of here, or whatever they're saying in that moment. They're here because we trust them.
Right.
And we believe that they have your best interest in mind, because they're our friends. They have our best interest in mind. You're
Yeah.
our best interest. And so proximity parenting. So,
And I
and
think
that's a
that's
beautiful
something
thing I
that,
think about the neighborhood. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that proximity. And I think that's something that's relatively unique to communities of color, and particularly
Yeah.
in the Black community. I think that proximity parenting is something that's, it's very community based. And as we know,
Absolutely.
our the, the communities of color are like, they're very community based, because, well, we've had to be
Yeah.
in order to
Yeah.
thrive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Survive
I
and
think
thrive.
absolutely. I think you could trace this back. I mean, when my father's from Ghana in West
Mhm,
Africa,
mhm.
and while I haven't been there as much as I want to, when I go there, I see community parenting all the time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Everybody is an elder, a respected person,
Mhm,
a parental figure. All of his friends are my uncle, whether they're
mhm,
related to me or not. All of his friends are my aunt, whether they're related, biologically to me or not, or
mhm,
genetically or not.
mhm,
And that's proximity parenting.
mhm.
That's community parenting, and I think that that's one of the beautiful things about particularly in the African American community. You see that a lot.
And I think that's as we talk about this space of raising empowered Black boys, I think one of the most important things is having that community,
Yeah,
having this community of people who they know is always with them, that has their
yeah,
back, that is for them, that is going to empower them, that is going to lift them up. You
yeah,
know, like, it's one
absolutely.
thing to have one parent that's trying to lift you up, but then, parents, we can't always lift from underwater, right? So we're
Yeah,
lifting up, and we're trying to have our lives, so we have to surround ourselves. And this brings me to another piece that you alluded to earlier, is that in order for us to be able to empower our kids in this way, we have to be willing to expand ourselves. We
yeah,
have to be willing to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to expand and learn more about what it means to step into both energies. Or what if, like, for women who might be um imbalanced and more into the masculine than the feminine, like, how do I rebalance that so I occupy both and I can
yeah,
access both at any given time? Or same thing with fathers, like, either
yeah,
one of the energies, how can I tap into both? Because this society is primarily a masculine dominated, male dominated society, so it makes sense that, given that influence, that people are pulled into that masculine side of interacting. and
yeah,
and because of history, and we can go all the way there, the history of, and the paternalism, and the culture, white supremacism culture and paternalism culture, the feminine energy has been suppressed and oppressed and thought to be bad in some
yeah,
way, especially in
yeah,
culture. And so then it's pulled even women a lot. That's why you see all these things about access your divine feminine, because we've been pulled away from it, trying to make it, trying to
yeah,
be seen in the corporate arena. And so
yeah,
I think it's just really important for us as parents to be willing to, number one, allow our kids to be teachers, as you said at the beginning,
yeah,
because that is real talk, right?
yeah.
Like, my son, he is my biggest coach every single day. I
There
didn't
you go.
realize how intolerant, how, the big gap in emotional intelligence that I was and had, until I had my son. And I was like,
Right.
"Ooh, I got a lot of growing to do."
Well, that's his divine duty, right? He was put there to help you expand and grow. I mean, so it's interesting that I like everything that you said. I want to piggyback on it, and I want to put out what I like to add as a point of clarity.
Mm,
And
please.
I want to have people play with this in their mind, and challenge me on it as well.
Yeah.
I don't think what we're seeing in our society is masculine energy. That's not the term that I use for it.
Mm.
I call it immature masculine energy, right? In fact, what I feel is we're in a race to the bottom, right? Like, everybody's trying to see who can be the worst type of male, right? Who can be a 12-year-old child, right? That's what I see, right? Like, who can urinate farther, who like, this is what it's this is immature masculinity. This is not masculinity, it's immature
Mm.
masculinity.
Like
And
that.
so when you act with bravado and machismo only, right? When
Mhm.
you're impulse only, when you're embarrass the other side, yell at the other side, denigrate the other side, show how tough you are, beat your chest. That's not masculine energy. That's immature masculine energy.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. That
Mhm.
has become the dominant, or one of the dominant forms of communication that we see,
Mhm.
particularly in pop culture, right? Everybody's a 12-year-old boy. Everybody wants to show how tough they are,
Right.
this type of thing. Both men and women, everyone is doing
Yeah,
this, right? And
absolutely.
so that's immature masculine energy. What I would argue is that we need to return to what I like to call mature masculine energy, or actually masculine energy.
Mhm.
And that sort of energy is what I try my best to embody, right? And that sort of energy can expand and can grow and can learn. And so,
Right.
you talked about our children being teachers. My children teach me because I'm willing to listen to them, right? I'm willing
Right.
to, maybe not in the moment, maybe not always in the moment, but I try to go, before I go to bed or whatever I'm going to do, sit there and see, did they have a point? I try to
Mhm.
listen to my wife. Like, does she have a point? I try to listen
Mhm.
to her mom and her dad, who are amazing teachers. I try to listen to my mom, and I try to remember the things my father told me. I try to listen to the community. Even this weekend when I was with the other brothers and we're chatting and talking, I'm humble enough to learn, and by
Mhm.
learning, then I can expand and be powerful and grow. And so I think that, whether you're in your masculine or whether you're in your feminine, you're a student. And if you can
Yes.
be a student, then you can conquer the world, right? And so I challenge people to get away from these, the immature masculine energy, which dominates so much of our culture. Just turn on the radio,
Mhm.
look at the television, as you mentioned, corporate America.
Mhm.
And that sort of energy, of course, is going to suppress anything that opposes it, including
Yeah.
feminine energy, right? It's going to make
Yeah.
it other, it's going to make it small, it's going to try to minimize it. But true masculine energy has no need to do that. Right? It's
Yes.
not necessary. It's, in fact, you grow, you expand, you become comprehensive by
Yeah.
embracing your feminine energy and by inviting feminine energy into the. I need my wife sometimes to come in and put her hand on my shoulder and say, let's think about how we can handle the situation, and we can dialogue. That's
Mhm.
important. That expands me. That makes me grow. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for her mature feminine energy, or like what I would call just feminine energy.
Well, it's interesting. I love the distinction, and I'm gonna take it a little bit deeper for you.
Sure.
So what you're speaking of is immature masculine energy. I love that. And what I'm gonna reframe it as is wounded masculine energy, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you could say the same thing for feminine energy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like wounded, and coming from the background of trauma, like there's this wounded masculine energy, this wounded feminine energy. And when two wounded people get together, hurt people,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so
Absolutely.
when we're willing to heal, then we become healed masculine, healed, feminine energy, and those two together can just soar,
Yeah.
right? So I
Absolutely.
really love that distinction of immature. I mean, it really is immature masculine energy, but that immature it's a stunting of emotional development,
There
and it
you go.
typically happens because of trauma.
Well, see, what you just did is you just showed why you're an excellent trauma counselor, and in your trauma training there, because that's exactly what it is, and you seamlessly put that in there, and the fact that you could see that so clearly, and that you work with people and help them get past that and move past that. I mean, that's what we need, right? Because now, whatever that stumbling block, whatever that thing that stunted your growth, we can work on removing that, and so that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that distinction. That's right.
Thank you. Yeah, so I man, so many places to go with this. And as you're like as a I think as a dad in your home, like how have you cultivated the way you bring emotional intelligence to your conversations with your boys?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think one of the most important things to do is to really understand the what we call the developmental or the life cycle of your children, right?
Mhm.
No one goes up to a 1 week old and gives them algebra and say, do this algebra. And then if they can't do it, punish them, right? I mean, it's just, it sounds ridiculous, right? But the challenge is that we forget that our children are children, right?
Yeah.
And particularly, and I would argue this, I have a friend, he has a 12-year-old, but his
Mhm.
12-year-old is 6'2", okay? He does not look like a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
but he is a 12-year-old. And
Mhm.
so some of the tasks that are requested of this 12-year-old child, it's like giving algebra to a 1-week-old. He just
Yeah.
doesn't have the developmental skills to do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And so in my household, I mean, I have one son and I have a daughter. And one of the things that I've been ranting about recently is reminding people of the developmental stages of children. And
Yes.
in this, for this conversation, of young boys,
Yeah.
and I think that people forget that,
Yep.
and you know there is the male mind, the young male mind is different. His mind is different from his sister's. They're two different minds. And
Mhm.
what we would do is, you would do this automatically. If you had a child, one was shy and one was more extroverted, you would modify your approach based on their personality. You
Mhm.
do that, probably most parents do that naturally.
Mhm.
If you had one child that was great with English and terrible with math, you would modify your approach. And
Mhm.
so what I try to remember is that when it comes to development, my son is at this level. He's at this stage. My
Mhm.
daughter is at this level. She's at this stage. And I try to um, prune my approach so that I get the best results based on where they are, not where I want them to be,
Right.
or not where phenotypically I think they should be because he's taller than her. I mean, that's just
Right.
ridiculous. But I think that it's very hard for people. And you
Yeah.
know this from medical school.
Mhm.
We spend so many hours learning a 1 week old baby does this, a seven
Mhm.
week old baby does this, a 2 year old child does this. And parents don't get that sort of education, but
Right.
it's hugely important,
Right.
especially if we're going to talk about our boys, because
Mhm.
our boys, all parents know boys are less mature, is the word, than girls. But this isn't just maturity, this is development.
Yes.
They're developmentally at a different stage than a
Mhm.
girl at the same age.
Mhm.
And so as I get older, more mature as a father, I think I do a better job of remembering that, right? He's just not here, but I can get him there. It may
Yeah.
be a different process, but we'll get there.
Right.
And I'm going to talk to him where he is, and I'm going to slowly get him where it is I feel he should be.
Right.
And it's a slow process,
Yeah.
but it's based on where he is developmental.
I love that. I love that you brought the developmental stages in, as I talk about that a lot as well. I think that, well, so as physicians, we, like you said, we study this so we understand it. But I think it's so
Yeah,
important for parents to start to learn that their kids go through these stages. And
yeah,
the stage represents a capacity. So
yeah, yeah.
people say, well, it's just in a stage, but the stage represents, it's not a phase. It's not something they
Right.
just go through. No, it represents a capacity, a brain capacity of the child to comprehend or to do one thing or another.
Yeah,
And so to understand what's needed in a particular like emotional development or psychological development stage is so important to then helping the child move themselves to the next stage. And it's
yeah,
interesting because I think it is um it in our culture, I think in I don't know if it's a US culture, or if it's Black American culture, if it's a function of dominant culture, but we have a tendency as parents to want to move our kids along, like move it along,
yeah,
mature already, like do
yeah.
it, grow up, and
Right.
right, get to the next stage already. It's like I remember when Delson was, I don't know, it was like 3, and I'd be sort of like in these mom groups, and they'd be talking about how their kid could read, and Delson was interested in reading, but he wasn't reading. And
Right.
I remember thinking, do I need to be forcing him to like doing drilling and doing and buying the I can read things, and they were buying all these like intricate programs to teach their kids to read. And my auntie is a former educator up in your
Okay.
area, by the way.
Ah.
And I called her and I said, my friends are doing ordering all these reading programs, and I'm wondering, should I do that? And she was like, no, this is
Mm.
way too early for him to
Right.
she said to me, you read to your son every night, all the time, and the way you converse with him, when it's time, he will pick it up and be a ravenous reader.
Right.
And my son's 8 now, and every night before he goes to bed, he's begging me for reading time. And
Ah.
he's like, he reads way above his level. And he just, one day he just picked it up,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so it speaks to. And all I did was sort of, provide the scaffolding, the
Mm-hmm.
empowerment, the encouragement. When he was ready, gave him something, that would challenge him, sit with him, read, celebrate when he did well,
There
how
you go.
he wasn't doing when he struggled. I said, okay, this is the word, like just provide that empowerment, which
Mm-hmm.
made him like reading. And I think that, along with things like math and school, I think that's very important, that we provide the scaffolding and make it fun, right, for
Yeah.
our kids, and
Yeah.
also give them agency. Like, one of the things I was like, at some point my son was saying, "I don't like to read," and I didn't really believe that, because he liked to fake to read, but but I
Right.
think it was he didn't like what he was reading.
Ah,
So as
okay.
soon as and this is why I talk about understanding what's important to your kids. As soon as I found what he liked to read, he loved it. As soon
Right.
as
It
I
took off.
found what math game he liked, oh, he
Yeah.
excels in math, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
just really speaking into our kids' listening empowers them, and they will naturally move to that next phase of development.
Well, so now I want to I want because what you just did there was okay. There's a lot to unpack there, and I want to talk about it all. First, briefly, briefly talk about it all. I mean, but the first thing was the word capacity, because I think that conveys the message so well, right? Their capacity to do something. And once again, that's the 1 week old giving them algebra. They don't have the capacity to
Right,
do it that moment.
right.
The other thing, so we're in this moment where people talk about mindfulness, right?
Mhm.
And so this rushing through the moment and trying to get to the next stage, that's
Mhm.
antithetical to mindfulness, right?
Right.
Isn't mindfulness enjoying this moment,
Yes.
maximizing this moment,
Yes.
enjoying this experience,
Mhm.
taking that deep breath, breathing it in as much as you can
That's right.
for this moment, being present here? And so one of the things I like to remind parents that I work with is mindfulness, right? Like your children require that as well, right? They don't need to be rushed prematurely to the next stage. They
Mhm.
need to get everything that's available in this stage, right? Let them absorb all of this, get prepared, learn this, master it, and then they'll move on to the next stage, as you said, naturally.
Mhm.
The other thing that, I mean, so, you know, the other thing that you talked about was listening to your child. And even if they're not verbalizing, because children, well, let's say human beings, because it's not just children,
Yeah.
human beings have a very difficult time verbalizing and expressing exactly what it is they need.
Yeah.
They'll say something to you, and you have to catch all the other clues that are going on, right?
Right.
So your son might say to you, I don't like to read, but there's something else going on there. It's not that he doesn't like the process of reading. Maybe he loves the process of reading. He just needs a new thing to
Mhm.
read, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
your ability to pick up on other clues,
Yep.
seek out what's going on, give him something else, that's huge. And then the last thing I'll say, and I know the parents won't agree with me, but I want them to hear this because I try to tell them this as much as possible, because
Right.
this is the truth.
Mhm.
All those things that you're doing, they do not have a long-term positive outcome. You're
Mm.
not there. You're not. Listen,
Mm.
I just and I say that lovingly. All
Yes.
right, I say it gently and lovingly because I want to do it too. Right?
Yeah.
I want to. My son is 3, and I want to buy Hooked on Phonics, and I can read yesterday, and then give right. I want to do all those things. But guess what? A few things. One, since we already talked about capacity and your child's capacity, they might not be reading because they're not at the developmental stage, even if they're at the chronological age, but maybe they're not at the developmental stage to
Mhm.
read. So that's one. Number two is forcing your child to do things early actually burns them out.
Mm.
Children whose parents have tried to get them to read earlier end up becoming more frustrated with school later on. This
Mm.
is one of the reasons why the play model has been adopted. And I understand, my family, my mother's side of the family is from the West Indies. My father's side of the family is from Ghana. There's very much a push that kids need to be reading and writing and doing arithmetic early.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to resist some of these impulses, right?
Right.
Because the social emotional, which is what people like to call it, but the
Yes.
social emotional development is hugely important, right?
Yes.
And a child who can navigate the waters at school, who learns how to play is actually the most important thing they can learn, especially
Yes.
up until 4 or 5. Those things serve them long term in life. And learning how to read, they're all going to learn to read. I mean, unless there is, some sort of developmental or learning disability, which some of our children have, and we need to work on with them as well. But most children are going to learn to read as long as they have the parents and the structure in the surrounding environment, meaning the school as well, that will teach them.
Mhm.
They'll learn to read, but learning how to play,
Mm.
learning how to cooperate, learning how to get individuals to buy in on a task and do it connectively and cooperatively together, those are
Mhm.
far more important skills, and they learn that by playing. So don't, don't take your 2-year-old and try to have them learning 3 different foreign languages and doing math and algebra early. It's unnecessary and it's counterproductive. So
That's right.
I throw that out for the parents. I know you're still gonna do it.
Well, I love what you're saying. I mean, really, play actually enhances learning, though. Like when
Absolutely.
parents can get that, play enhances learning because it lowers the stress hormone cortisol. And
Yeah,
so, if
absolutely.
you need a biological reason to
Yeah,
help,
yeah, yeah,
here
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Here it is. And one other thing I'll piggyback on is like when one of the things I do, because this is around like grades and academics. One of the things I do with my son is, and since kindergarten, I asked him, "What are your goals? What would
Mm.
you like to make?" Now, if you ask a kid, a young kid, that, I mean, of course, like, you know, they will, they'll say what they say. I'm trying to make more friends, but I asked him
Eat candy.
specifically. I said, "Well, in the scheme of, you're going to be graded, starting in
Yeah,
first grade, you're going to be graded. A means this, B means this. Where would you like to be?" And
yeah,
most kids are going to be like, "Oh, I want to be an A,"
yeah,
they
yeah,
want to
yeah,
do well.
yeah.
And so I said, "Okay, so okay, so is that a goal?" And I teach them goals early. And I think when kids set their own goals, then they're more motivated to achieve them.
Oh, absolutely,
Right. So
absolutely.
then, my son says, "Oh, I want all A's." And I said, "Okay, great." And so he comes home with all A's. And I'm like, "Oh, you achieved your goal." Or he comes home with a B. And I said, "Oh, well, B is right next to an A. What do you think?" I ask him, like, "Well, what do you think was the gap?" Like, if he had
Yeah,
an A and then it dropped to a B, like, I don't persecute him for this. Like, "Oh, what do you think was the gap?" And he
right.
asked me one time, "Well, do you think that will you be mad at me if I don't get all
Mm.
A's?" And
Yeah,
I'll say, "Well, of course not." It's like, "No, of course I
yeah,
won't." The conversation was, what will determine is if there's something that needs to be done to like a gap that needs to be filled to help you learn something that was missed, that would get you back to an A. But a B is not a bad grade. Now, if
right.
you were getting Fs, then we'd really need to take some steps to see what's happening in the learning. Like, I mean, we have these conversations. I think we assume that kids don't understand these conversations,
Yeah,
but when you have them in a way that's, when you're calm and you speak on the child's level, they
yeah,
really kind of they understand. And I think we sometimes underestimate conversationally
yeah.
our children.
Oh, absolutely. And what you're doing there is you're, excuse me, you're shifting it from an external locus to an internal locus,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
instead of him trying to get A's because he doesn't want to make mom mad, he's getting A's because he wants A's, right?
Hmm.
And that internal focus, that will last him for the rest of his life, right?
Hmm.
There is a, people like to talk about personal responsibility and versus the structures. I don't
Hmm.
think it's either or, but
Right.
I do think that when you realize your own personal power, right, the fact that you can change things, that you have some agency in this, your results are different. They may not be perfect. There still may be currents pushing against you, but you have a different sense of motivation and you can accomplish different things. So
Hmm.
that is it's huge for him, and that will pay dividends in the future because he's not trying to just impress mom or placate mom or stop mom from getting angry. He's doing it because he actually has a sense that this will make me happy, and that's huge. That's
Yeah.
that's that's really big.
And it's interesting because, I mean, it sort of broadens out to parenting in general. It's like, in the mornings to get them in the car, it's like, well, if we don't leave by this time, you're going to be late. That's going to be a tardy on your record. It's not my record. It's your record. It's your school.
Yeah,
It's your life. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know that I don't have to rush him to get to the car because
Right.
he's calling me, "Mom, we need to leave. We're going to get late. And I don't want a tardy on my record." Like,
Right, right. Well,
that's,
because now you've created internal. So this is one of the things that they often say, like, be careful what you do for your children, right? If you're
mhm,
doing everything for your child, then they
mhm,
don't build up the resiliency and the muscle to do that for themselves. And so this the sentiment of helicopter parenting,
Yeah.
bulldozer parenting, all those kind of
Mhm.
cool terms people use. But there's a reason why we say those things aren't effective for children. Because if I wake my son up and then I brush his teeth and then I put on his clothes and the whole time I'm like, oh, we're going to leave, we're going to leave, we're going to be late, we're going to be late. First of all, the level of cortisol and stress that's involved in that environment, no one's having fun. I'm not having fun. He's
Mhm.
not having fun. It becomes
Mhm.
stressful. The day becomes stressful. His framing of school is through stress.
Mhm.
It just doesn't work. But when he has an internal drive and he does it on his own and he takes responsibility because he doesn't want to be late, I mean, that's a huge, that shift that's an epiphany. It really is. It's
Yeah.
monumental. It will pay dividends down the line. I mean, it's huge.
And there's a balance, right? It doesn't mean that we provide no structure. It's
Of
it's
course.
it's
Yeah.
like that line of internal locus of control and structure to guide them. Like, how do you create the structure to be able to be on time, to do the things
Right.
we need to do, like the
Absolutely.
alarms or we do this we do the lunches the night before and things of that nature, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's how it works. It's a marriage.
It
Earlier
is.
we were talking about masculine energy and feminine energy, and having both in abundance, creating that internal locus of control where they feel motivated, but having the systems where they can get to where they need to be. I think that's the perfect balance.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and perfect doesn't mean that it works perfectly. It just means that it's the perfect balance.
Thank you, because it's not going to ever work
Oh no. Oh
perfectly.
no.
All right.
No, no, no.
Last conversation. Last conversation.
Yeah.
Difficult conversations.
Okay. That's my difficult face.
Well, so I'll share, I've shared in a previous episode
Okay.
that I had a loss in my family, and so being with my son through this sort of like grief process, some difficult conversations come up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Conversations about death and loss and
Hmm.
grief and what it looks like, and like conversations like that. And I
Yeah.
and I think that I did a an episode early on emotional honesty with our kids, and I think it's
Hmm.
important that we're emotionally honest with our kids because they see they see
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
what happens is, like grief can look sad, but grief can also look like agitation and irritability.
Hmm.
And stress can look, like irritability as well.
Yeah.
And so when we begin to ourselves expand our capacity to name emotions, to be emotionally literate and fluent,
Yeah. Yeah.
then we actually model that for our kids. And I think one of the reasons that we're seeing such a mental health, and this is speculation, y'all, okay, so just stay with me on this. I
Bear
think
with us.
right. I think that one of the reasons we're seeing such a mental health crisis in our kids and our adolescents and our young adults is because we're not modeling the emotional fluency. We're not teaching them the emotional fluency and literacy. We, and I'm going to say we, and particularly in the Black community, like to hide our emotions. And there's a reason for that. We could go into a whole nother episode
Yeah.
around why we do that. Like, what is the survival mechanism? What is the historical survival mechanism that has us do that?
Yeah.
And what it does is it models. I remember having this conversation with my auntie, and she was like, this whole like emotional intelligence thing and is really new for our generation because we didn't talk about emotions. And it
Yeah.
and it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
survival was the order of the day. And
Yeah.
now there's a new, well, I mean, survival is still a conversation. Let's be real. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
we know that. But
Yeah.
we've evolved to be
Yeah.
able to, include that resilience and that emotional intelligence and that social emotional learning, as you so well put it. And so I think part of developing that at home, there are lots of schools that are now incorporating that, but we have to model it because kids are sponges. They pick
Yeah.
it up.
Absolutely.
And only 7% of communication is verbal anyway.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able to, we're gonna model it non-verbally, and we can also speak it verbally.
Yeah. So I agree with everything that you said. I think, I already expressed my condolences for your loss, and these are challenging and hard things to deal with.
Mhm.
So this weekend, when I was at my friend's birthday party, one of the parents talked about her daughter, who was, I think, 4 at the time. and they had just moved to a new neighborhood. And in her school, the kids were making fun of her or talking about her brown skin,
Mhm.
and she came home very upset,
Mhm.
about her brown skin. And so I think what's important here is that there are going to be a lifetime of difficult conversations.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think there's a couple things that are important. First, like you said, naming the emotion,
Mhm.
and we do that sometimes with both my son and my daughter. I see you're frustrated, and
Mhm.
we try to use the right emotion as well,
Mhm. Mhm.
because sometimes everything feels like anger, or thing feels like anger. I think is one of the ones that we talk about the most in my household, because maybe you're not angry, maybe you're just frustrated. There's other words there, and I think it's important to understand that. So naming the emotion. The other thing is that sometimes I say, as I said before, I don't know. Sometimes there is no word, there's nothing
Mhm.
you're going to say that's going to make things better.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make it better just by your presence and
Yeah.
being there through this moment with your child,
Mhm.
and I've
Mhm.
found that very effective. Sometimes I need to just sit with, and I, it's different with my daughter and my son. Sometimes I'll sit and my daughter will get on my lap in the couch and she'll just be there, and she's
Mhm.
a little bit more verbal than my son, and then
Mhm.
we'll get to a different place. And
Yeah.
sometimes with my son, he's just in the room and I'm in the room and he's on the couch, and then after a few minutes he comes over and, dad, let's do this, and he's
Yeah.
ready to move on. And so sometimes just the presence is enough. Sometimes there is no magic word or magic pill. You don't have the words, because I don't always have the words. I don't know
Yes.
always what to say. And
That's
life
right.
is challenging. And resiliency isn't necessarily about solving a situation, but
Mhm.
being able to go through it and get better on the other side. And so,
Yes.
I mean, I think that that's one of the things that is important for parents to understand, right? We're not here to fix everything or to solve everything, but we're here to be with our child as they go through everything.
Yes, I love it. Holding space.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
when we don't always have the words for the emotion, or when there's emotion present and we don't always have the words to console, or sometimes
Yeah,
it's just about holding space for the person to have
absolutely.
the emotion, making it okay for our kids to have an emotion, and knowing
Yeah,
that we're going to be there with them through that emotion,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I love what you said about, like, reframing emotion. Sometimes
yeah.
when the emotional vocabulary is anger, sad, happy,
Right,
then it's like, or maybe excited gets in there.
right, right,
Then we can start to tease out, well, maybe it's not anger, maybe it's frustration, or
right.
maybe it's not anger, maybe it's sadness, or maybe it's not sadness, maybe it's hurt, or like, we could really
Yeah,
start to, like, expand the emotional lexicon, and by reframing those the naming of those emotions. So I really, that was beautiful. Yeah, holding space, though, that's what I really took away from that. Holding
I like
space
that. Yeah,
for our kids to have the emotion, making it be okay for them to feel emotion, because
absolutely.
there's a lot of, well, don't cry, or don't feel that
Right,
way, even as
right.
adults. Oh, well,
Yeah,
you shouldn't feel that way, or you
yeah,
don't have anything to be angry about, or you don't have anything to be sad about, right? And what that does is it invalidates the person, the
yeah.
emotion. And then
Shame
what
that
happens is you
emotion.
become unsafe,
Right,
and then the person won't express emotion around you anymore, like the
right.
kid won't express, and then that's when it becomes dangerous, when the
Absolutely.
child stops expressing, feeling safe enough to express around you. That's when it becomes dangerous, because then you don't know what's going on until something's really wrong.
Right. And they'll find someone else to express it to. It just won't be you.
Right.
Right. And
Or they'll
then
find
you'll
some
be
other way to express it, and it may not be
exactly.
healthy.
Absolutely. And then you're blindsided by the results, right? And so
Mhm.
that's we don't want to shame emotions. We want to give them the tools to work through it. And what a beautiful moment in time we're in, where adults can do that, right? So
Yeah.
the older generation in my family says this as well. Like, this is very unfamiliar to them.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, isn't it a beautiful thing that we can take the strength and power of your values and add the language of emotion and marry those two together and get to this moment in time, right? We haven't thrown out the baby with the bathwater. We've taken,
Yeah.
all that you guys have given us, and we've
Mhm.
added this and enhanced it. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, I think. And so I
Yeah.
think we it's better personally, and it's enhanced.
Yeah. What a beautiful conversation. Oh my goodness. I had to let it go on a little bit longer than usual, because we just like we were just flowing, you know. Oh my goodness.
Well,
So
you and I talk, it could be 2-3 hours.
I know. I knew this was gonna be. I knew this was gonna be a little bit longer of an episode than most because we already talked for about 5 hours, and then we have to condense everything we want to say into like 45 minutes.
And it's difficult. It's difficult.
It is. It is.
It's difficult.
Well, this is the first of many. I mean, we will definitely have more conversations. I want you to just let the audience know like what you do with parents, like the coaching that you do with parents. I mean, I know you have the course that you have. I know you have a course,
Sure. Yeah.
and you do some coaching, and so I want you to let them know about that. And then how can they reach out to you, find you? Get in touch with you if they want to take your course, learn more about you, invite you to speak somewhere. How can they reach out to you?
Sure. So, right now I have a course you can go to Healthy with Dr. D. That's the website, Healthy with Dr. D, and it's just D, the letter. We do a lot. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is a course that we put up so quickly, but I think it's so quality. We have a course up right now called Mastering Your Child's Sick Day. And the reason why we put this up was because of what we've all just been experiencing. Like all the parents were calling me and they were terrified to send their kids to school. They didn't know what was going on. We had COVID, we had influenza, we had RSV, and they wanted to know, how could I manage this? So we created a course, and that's one of the courses that's up there now. And parents can go and take that course and learn how to keep your child healthy, to keep them safe, to bolster their immune system when you need to go to see your doctor, what cures you can do at home that are useful to keep your child healthy, what's total bupkis and you shouldn't listen to. So that's all there. And we just actually finished creating another course that's not up yet, but will be there for parents who have newborns. So if you're a parent and you're pregnant, or you're having a newborn coming into your life soon, or you have a friend, that'll be there so that you can understand this incredible, beautiful, but mysterious and challenging entity that will be sitting in a in a crib a foot or two away from you that you have no idea how to manage and how to handle that. So that'll be up hopefully within the next 2 weeks. So if you want, go to Healthy with Dr. D. You can email me. It's interesting that we're doing this, but the major thing I do is actually coach families and adults about how to be healthy, the pillars of health, how to get your body back into a shape that it will respond when you put demands on it. That's actually what I do most of the time. The pediatric stuff came about because of the need. My friends and family were like, listen, we need to clarify this. What is RSV? What's going on? Everyone's sick. I don't know why is his immune system, weakened by this COVID-19. And I was like, okay, stop. Get out of Google.
I got you.
I got you. Go to Healthy with Dr. D and we'll answer those questions and give you actually some facts. So if you want to get in touch, just go there and email me, and I'm very responsive. We'll email quickly.
And we will have all of this information in our show notes. If you're listening on replay, if you're listening on YouTube, we'll put it in the description soon. And of course, this is a live broadcast. And so we will be rebroadcasting this podcast in a few weeks as well. And so you'll see that promoted as well. So it'll be in the show notes on your favorite podcast platform. So Dr. Ayim or Dr. D. Healthy with Dr. D.
You've known me so long. So
I know.
You've known all the phases of nicknames that I've had throughout the last, I won't say how long it's been, a couple years.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was life-giving. It was just amazing. This is why I have the podcast, to have these kinds of amazing conversations with amazing people like you. So I just so appreciate you. You all go to Healthy with Dr. D and check out Dr. Ayim Darkeh. And what I really want to say is, share this episode with someone in your community, another parent, a colleague who's a parent, anyone in the community that can benefit from this, because really everyone can benefit from this conversation with a parent or a caretaker of a child, or even an educator,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can benefit from this conversation. So share this episode, leave a review, let us know what you thought of Dr. Darkeh, because he's awesome and he's brought so much to this conversation. And share this podcast. If you feel like this is a valuable conversation, go ahead and subscribe, because we're having these conversations every week. So with that, I thank you again.
Thanks for having me. And parents and caregivers, be kind to yourself, be forgiving to yourself. It'll get better.
Absolutely. We have to honor our humanity and
Yes.
know that in parenting, there is no rule book.
There you go. And no breaks.
And no breaks and no breaks. Unless you take them.
Which you
That's
should.
another
That'll
episode.
be next conversation.
All right, y'all. You all have a wonderful rest of the week, rest of the day. Stay safe out there. And as always, I am committed to seeing you empowered because you all are the bridge to the next generation of empowered and resilient leaders. You all are the bridge to the new future. I'll see you on the next episode. Namaste.